In 2047, a colony of scientists, farmers, soldiers, priests, artists, and AI, all looking for a new life, landed on Mars. The mission was simple: to survive and establish a...
What happened?
To survive and establish...
We are so far beyond keeping it together.
To survive and establish...
Then you can come at me right now!
To survive. Marsfall, survival on the Red Planet. Marsfall is a science fiction podcast about the first colonists on Mars. Listen for free wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
This is The Linda Steele Show on demand. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts and listen weekdays 3 to 6 on 980 CKNW and on the Radio Player Canada app.
First here, we deep dive into what was announced over the last hour by our provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, flanked by her elected officials, as this announcement was made by Premier Horgan.
I'm happy to announce that on July 1st, we will begin step 3 of our restart plan. After the longest public emergency in Canadian history, I believe it's safe to take the next step forward. That means we can go and cheer for our kids at the soccer game, in the arena, in the gymnasium. We can go to a friend's place for dinner. We can plan that wedding. We can go to the theater. We can go to a concert. We can engage again in what makes life so important. That's the interaction of people together to get a full flavor of the benefits and bounty of British Columbia and to share with each other the blessings of being British Columbians. Let's take a moment today to reflect on where we've been and celebrate the opportunities that we have ahead of us as individuals, as families, and as communities to put COVID-19 behind us, from a pandemic to a communicable disease.
It was an incredible press briefing that we witnessed. There was so much to talk through. And as always, we're fortunate to welcome Global BC's Legislative Bureau Chief Keith Baldry to the program with all the details for us. And Keith, before we get to checking off the list of questions I know people have, I have a question for you. Was this about you?
Oh, look at this. Intruder alert. Intruder alert.
There were 3 of us, 3 reporters in attendance for the first time in front of John Horgan. Well more than I think back to March 2020. We just have been on 15. The phone in these news conferences. The restrictions were relaxed starting last week. So that's the 3rd time I've been in that press theater since March 2020. The others, of course, in there, Richard Zussman of Global was there, and Binder Stajan from CTV. So for the first time, Premier Horgan was taken aback with the physical presence of actual real live journalists.
It was great. And in the moment I was watching it live on BC One, because you and Richard had just been on in the lead up to the press briefing that started a little bit after the time expected. And you were saying, I got to get there. There's air conditioning in that room. I need to cool off.
That's why I was there yesterday for Dr. Henry and Minister Dix's briefing, because the hottest day of the year, of course, yesterday, and that press theater was a refuge of an oasis of air conditioning in a 100-year-old plus building that you don't actually see a lot of air conditioning. That room's the exception.
Well, there you go. That and Mike Smith's makeshift studio in the bowels of the legislature. I heard that on Baldry's Beat yesterday. Tuned in, as you always are, Keith Baldry. George Affleck and I were just speaking to this. You are like the Encyclopedia Britannica human version of COVID-19 information, which is why we're so pleased to have the next 20 minutes or so with you. And yes, we're going to open up the phones because I'm already getting text messages from people to ask you questions. I haven't even said I was going to ask you questions from our listeners, but yes, I will. But let's start with what you heard today. What really jumped out at you in terms of what is changing as of Thursday?
Well, there's nothing really unexpected, except some clarity, some welcome clarity on how big a crowd you can be part of now. So it's 50 people or 50% of their capacity. And the capacity for some establishments can be quite large. And that includes, where the BC Lions play, where the Canucks play. So it's 50% capacity, which means there could be many thousands of people now permitted to attend Lions games and Canucks games. Those are the big examples. But the smaller examples, there's likely, and they were asked this today, it's still unclear, but festivals and fairs can now probably figure out a way to open with 50% capacity. I'm not sure about the P&E. I'm not sure. As you know, I'm a huge P&E fan.
Me too.
I'm not sure what the capacity is on the P&E grounds, but now they can. These things can go ahead with 50% capacity, which is welcome news. Other than that, basically what we heard today was sketched out when this was first announced in mid-June, when we did our step 1 and step 2, and now the way was cleared for getting to step 3. So not a lot of new information today, but some clarity on some of the stuff that was announced before. And again, it's basically opens things up significantly. And one of the other clarity was more people at tables in restaurants, but you still can't table hop. You're not supposed to socialize between tables, so that was cleared up today as well.
So there's really no direct line in stage 3 to, concerts, those indoor shows. I've been getting a bunch of questions there are concerts planned at BC Place for August. Is there any indication that these will go ahead, or will we have to wait until stage 4 in terms of that? Because there's that, singing and dancing and, crammed together. That would be next level from table hopping, I'd imagine.
Well, it's according to the documents released today, organized gatherings, which would be a concert, indoors, 50 people, or up to 50% capacity, whichever is greater. So you look at BC Place, 50% capacity is tens of thousands of people, but it's not full capacity. Outdoor, 5,000 people, or up to 50% of capacity, whichever is greater. Indoor weddings, ceremonies, and events, 50 people, or up to 50% capacity, whichever is greater. And fairs, festivals, and trade shows can return to normal with communicable disease plans in place, which are not COVID-19 plans. These are more traditional flu-type anti-flu plans. So it looks like we are going to see some concerts. We are going to see some festivals, albeit with smaller numbers in attendance. And maybe, the economics of these events come into play. Can the promoters still make a profit or break even with smaller crowds? It's probably going to be look different on an individual basis.
Yeah, we'll probably be paying a premium, but so many people starved for that live music experience, maybe willing to buck up. I hope the P&E does find a way to move forward. As Dr. Henry was speaking about how, while we're not out of this yet, and there will still be monitoring and we'll still be tracking, I imagine the contact tracers' jobs are much easier today than they were even just a couple of months ago, that the outdoor being the safest alternative still, and how we just simply need to be mindful. I want to play this one clip actually from Dr. Henry, if I may. This was sort of her statement about what today represents.
And it is indeed a great announcement today that we are ready to bring us back together. We have never been here before, and it has been a long 18 months. Some people and some businesses will be moving more slowly, and that's okay, and we need to respect that. It is all of our responsibility to do this well, and having been through this last 18 months, I know that we can do this too. And we can do it with kindness, with the compassion, the diligence and commitment that got us here and got us through this last 18 months. We're turning up the dial slowly, but things are a lot brighter today.
What a warrior. That champion of a woman has been working as hard.
I have to say, that briefing today, I've been a part of every briefing, every single one since day one. Been in attendance the early on, the first 40 or so, and then on the phone for most all of them since then. But today it was almost giddy in that room. Premier Horgan was sort of not joking around, but there was a bit of laughter, and there was this sort of easing of tension because it's been so gripping for so long. And now that we're really into a completely different level of activity that really wasn't even envisioned back in April when we had 1,200 people a day being sick, 500 people in hospital, almost 200 people in critical care. That was an extraordinary time. And now we've come out of that and we're in a very good place. So I think there was this noticeable easing of tension amongst all the players involved today.
And Premier Horgan did, he said, am I jumping the gun on this one by saying that there were 29 new cases from yesterday to today?
Jumping the gun.
He did, because the release isn't out yet, but we did hear just 7 cases in the Fraser Health region. I mean, that was like, whoa, I'm kind of glad he dropped that one on us.
Yeah, it's interesting going through the cases every day with Minister Dix, and we remember going back in some months ago, Fraser Health was really a very serious concern, and particularly Surrey, because we were talking hundreds of cases a day there. Yeah. Then they got down to 200, and we thought, wow, that's an accomplishment. Then down to the 100s, then down to double digits, and now single digits. It's quite extraordinary to see the impact the vaccination program has had on COVID-19. It is eradicating it. One dose is proving to be strong enough to give such a level of protection to people that COVID is finding a hard place to live right now. A virus needs a host body, and there are fewer host bodies available to it, which is why we're seeing the numbers drop so extraordinarily quickly.
Jody Vance with you, alongside my colleague Keith Baldry, Global BC's Legislative Bureau Chief in Victoria and expert on all things COVID-19 when it is related to our pandemic response here in British Columbia. Today, the big announcement of the Stage 3 of BC's reopening plan. Time to open up the phone lines and take your calls for Keith Baldry. And Keith, of course, as always, the phone lines light up when you make yourself available to our listener. Let's get right to it and begin with Linda in Coquitlam. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I just had a question regarding the use of masks in healthcare facilities. Keith, I'm not sure you're aware of a communication from the Ministry of Health on June 18th that overrode the November 2020 edict on the use of masks in healthcare facilities like long-term care and hospitals. And we just had an update on that on June 18th. And I'm just wondering if today's announcement now supersedes that announcement from
I remember the November protocol. What was the update on the 15th? Was it just the masks are no longer required?
They are mandatory by workers and visitors to healthcare facilities and long-term care. That
they're still mandatory or not mandatory?
They are still mandatory.
Right.
That's a good question. I'll try to look into that for you. I think healthcare does seem to be a separate sector than other sectors when it comes to certain public health measures. Remember, the rules for long-term care were quite different than pretty well any other institution or facility, and again, same with hospitals. So it's likely that health order internally will likely be the one that's going to be enforced, but I'll check into that.
Thank you for your call, Linda. Let's go to Rob in Coquitlam. Your question for Keith Baldry.
Yeah, hi, Keith. I was just wondering, is there any concerns about the Delta virus? Because we see Sydney, Australia, other countries now are having some issues after they opened up. What's your feelings on that? Please, I'll just hang up and listen. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, we've talked to Dr. Henry, Minister Dix, about this, and Dr. Danuta Skoronsky, who you had on the show last week, and I wrote a column about her. Jody made that pivotal decision to stretch out the interval between the 2 doses, which meant we got many people in their 20s and 30s vaccinated at far higher rates than other jurisdictions, because we did not adopt the rigid age base and get everybody 2 doses. We would try to get as many first doses to people as possible. So what you're seeing in the UK is the Delta variant on the loose and infecting people in their 20s and 30s, and those people largely are unvaccinated. And that's not the case in BC. So Dr. Henry's explained pretty well every case that comes in now and tests positive is a variant of concern. It's either the Alpha variant, originally detected in the UK, the Gamma variant, originally detected in Brazil, or the Delta variant, originally detected in India. As of last Friday, the Delta variant comprised 12% of the cases. So a couple things. That percentage is not very high. And secondly, as you see today and yesterday, the number of cases is very low. So it would have to take an extraordinary situation for the Delta variant to suddenly grow in size and proportion at a time when the numbers of COVID is not out there in any great degree. It is not finding as many bodies to host it because of so many vaccinations. So the Delta variant right now is not seen as a terrible threat to BC, but we'll see. They're going to be there, of course. She says they're monitoring this constantly. It's not like everybody's packing up and going home. It's just that the case numbers are so low now, we can start doing more things. But they're going to keep an eye on the Delta variant and other variants to make sure it doesn't get out of control. But right now, there's reason for confidence.
Because the vaccines work. That is the conversation. I have to thank you publicly for directing me toward Dr. Danuta Skowronski, who was on with us. It was so fascinating to hear her unpack the timeline of her experience and the science behind it, and how at the forefront and cutting edge of that discovery we were here in British Columbia, and how we're seeing that benefit us today. It is so huge. Want to carry on with the callers? 604-280-9898, star 9898 is a free call on your cell. Neil in Langley, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi there. Keith, thank you so much for all the last 16 plus months, because I run the health and safety department at my workplace, and listening to you following a press conference and other journalists, it's been great for clarification. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And perfect. And just in regards to that, so now we're changing from COVID-19 safety plans to communicable, and I wish it was easier to say. They're going to give a bit of delay on that, or not delay, but a bit of a transition period. And the other concern is masks as well in workplace or office settings. I know that's going to be a concern. There's lots of sensitivity behind that. So does anyone more speak of that?
Yeah, so there is going to be some transition here, and she made the point today. Some are going to proceed at a different pace than others. It's going to be interesting on the masks. Some companies may, or some retail outlets, some stores may insist on mask wearing. Keep in mind, the old no shirt, no shoes, no service seems to be fine with people, and some companies may want to insist that applies to mask wearing. They may still require their employees to wear a mask as part of their employment. And so this is going to look differently in different places. And in terms of the communicable disease plans, these are going to be developed in conjunction with Public Health and WorkSafe BC, and they're not particularly new. They're just basically what is there and reminding the businesses in seasonal flu situations, for example. And again, it calls for higher sanitation and more hand washing, more sanitation measures and such. And again, this is not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. Keith, I have to echo Neil's sentiments. You have been a rock, a champion, a bastion of actual facts and real news. You're the example of why journalism matters in BC and across the country and really the world.
I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Dr. Bonnie Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix for just basically being so open and accessible with information, and basically Dr. Henry teaching us so many things that we didn't know before.
Jody Vance with you on this sweltering day, a day where you might want to just stay indoors and maybe go through your finances and think about how you invest and run things when it comes to your dollars and cents, everything financial, as it were. Peter Sashecki is a registered financial planner and president of Everything Financial Group and joins us always weekly to give us some insights and maybe debunk some things that we have sort of become accustomed to hearing and thinking must be true. And Peter, I always learn something when you check in here, and I'm looking forward to today's because I have a feeling I might have a couple of things to learn on your list.
Are you staying cool? That's the big question.
Well, I am. Work from home is quite interesting when you don't have air conditioning. We are looking to take care of one another through this. So I think, if we can just make sure we hydrate and get through this together 1 second at a time. I mean, there's nothing like this. Certainly feeling it across BC and the Lower Mainland. We're just not built for this, I don't think, Peter.
No, when we talk about investing all the time, we talk about supply and demand and how a lot of times things are more expensive if there's a lot of demand. Can you imagine the windfall air conditioning sales people are having right now? Because if you waited till July to buy your air conditioner, I have a hunch you're probably going to pay 2 or 3 times more what you normally would pay. So the lesson, if you want to put in air conditioning, contact your air conditioning person in December. Might be the best time to do it.
Right around November.
Yeah, this might be a good time. Just saying.
Yeah, see? Always smart. Let's dive in because I think that one of the most difficult things to navigate is when somebody tries to tell you one investment over another and why. When people talk about mutual funds or RRSPs or TFSAs or trying to pay down their mortgage, and all of it gets so complicated for people that are hardworking and yet maybe don't know how to manage their money. Where do we begin in debunking and dispelling some of these myths?
Well, there's always the one too. My friend said,
right? Oh my gosh, if I had a dollar.
My friend, the guy at work said, well, what does the guy at work do? Because that's the first thing. So here's a couple that we hear all the time. And I hear these, and listeners have wrote these in, and they'll say, well, because I always talk about the embedded fees and the lack of disclosure about mutual funds. And people think I've just got this hate on for mutual funds and banks. And I try and dispel, there's a myth right there. It's not that I have a hate on. I just think there should be proper disclosure for people. And that's my job on this segment we do, is to try and educate people. So people say, well, I don't have mutual funds, I have RSPs. Well, that doesn't mean you don't have mutual funds. RSPs, TFSAs, are a type of account. A mutual fund or a term deposit, a GIC, is a type of investment. So the two are not mutually exclusive. You could have RSPs invested in stocks, you could have RSPs invested in mutual funds, a portfolio manager, or a simple daily interest savings account could be where you park your RSPs. So you have to get yourself educated on that with your statements. Saying I don't have, mutual funds and I'm not paying all those, non-disclosed fees. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because your mutual funds could be in your RSPs. The other one we had was, I don't want to buy. I hear this all the time. I don't want to buy a TFSA. They don't make any money. Well, depends how. Again, they're not the same thing always. It depends how it's invested. Because when you go into your bank and you see TFSAs paying 0.25%, well, would you want to invest in something earning 0.25%?
No.
I think I'd rather spend it on that new air conditioning unit I need for the house.
Correct, sir. Correct.
It's how you invest your TFSA. So your TFSA, if it's long-term, not short-term, so let's clarify that, because I'm speaking to a whole bunch of listeners whose situations might be completely different. But if your money is long-term, look at something maybe more aggressive for your TFSA, where not having to pay interest on that growth will be beneficial for you 5, 6, 7, or 15 years down the road. That's a key.
So knowing who your investment or who you're working with in terms of how your money is managed is so key here. And then yet some people might say, you know what, independent investment companies cannot protect my money like a bank can. What do you say to that?
Well, they can. And I had this one this morning from someone who's a listener, loyal listener, whose mom is quite elderly and sold her place and just wants to park that money because she's now living in a home that's all provided for and whatnot, and felt, well, the bank protects my money, the independent companies don't. And that's complete, you know what. There's 2 letters for that description, which I will not use, or you're going to have to use the beep button on me here. But your money's protected the same. As long as your money is held with a custodian. A custodian, for layman's terms, is the vault. So it's not the portfolio management company, or in a lot of cases, even the mutual fund company that holds your money. They trade your money. But your money is held with a custodian, so that's an insured bank recognized by the government of Canada. They hold your money. So when you deposit your money, it goes to the custodian, not XYZ investment company. And when you want to take income out of your money, XYZ bank sends it to you, not XYZ investment company. So there's insurance on these companies who are holding your money in the vault, whether it's the bank or the independent investment company. Don't believe the hogwash that, if I don't go to the bank, my money's not protected. The difference is the independent portfolio management companies are the only ones who are true fiduciaries who have to, by law, advise you of all your fees, and they have to disclose that to you, where the banks do not have to disclose that to you. Hence why, and we've talked about this before, Jody, why in a non-registered portfolio, also known as a taxable investment, you're able to write off those fees with the independent companies because you know what those fees are. They're disclosed. Right. You can't write them off with the bank because the bank government won't let you write them off because we don't know what it is. We don't know what the fee is. So you can't just make it up and say, I want to write off this much. So there's the further tax deductions you gain by going independent.
Okay, I've only got 30 seconds here, but I have to ask this last one because I've heard this a million times. I don't need to save for my retirement. I have a pension.
Yeah, well, you got to talk to someone independent to build your plan for you. They build the plan, not the investment portfolio. Because what if your pension only provides for about 35% of what you need for retirement? And I see that all the time. People won't look at building a plan because they have a pension. You need to know, and we talked about this, I think, last week or the week before, what do you need? And then fill in the gap. So you have to fill in the difference over and above your pension, or else you could be in for a rude awakening one day when you suddenly realize pension's great, but it's not enough and there's a shortfall. Go to an independent registered financial planner, figure out what the shortfall is, use an independent investment company to build the shortfall for you.
You reach out to Peter Sashecki at Everything Financial Group is how you do that. He is a registered financial planner and happens to be the president of the company. Peter, as always, thanks for this.
I'll see you or hear from you in a few weeks, Jody. Enjoy some time off and enjoy the weather.
I'm Jody Vance with you. Hopefully you are staying cool wherever you are, hitting new record highs in British Columbia. Lytton just hit another record, according to the Weather Network. Lytton, BC, 49 degrees today. All of British Columbia and most of Alberta now under that heat dome. It is slowly moving away from the coast here where we are in Metro Vancouver, but unprecedented heat, obviously, over the bulk of our province. Earlier today at the Stage 3 reopening press briefing, where there was much levity, much positivity, much to look forward to, Premier John Horgan was asked whether the province should have done a better job at preventing sudden deaths during this heat wave.
I'll await the coroner's determination. As Dr. Henry said, fatalities are part of life, and the consequences or the causes of those fatalities are examined by officials that we put in place as a society to make sure we're getting the best information possible so that we can put in place programs and policies to protect people going forward. And again, this was an unprecedented heat wave, records broken day after day. The public was acutely aware that we had a heat problem, and we were doing our best to break through all of the other noise to encourage people to take steps to protect themselves.
Fatalities are a part of life was likely not landing well with the majority of people impacted negatively by this heat wave and the absolute terrifying numbers that are being reported now with the strain on emergency resources. And we want to touch base now with the provincial president of Ambulance Paramedics and Dispatchers of BC, and a paramedic for the last 33 years. He's a good friend of the program. You'll recognize Troy Clifford. Welcome back to the show, Troy. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Jody, for having me on.
So how does that land with you, knowing how stressed and threadbare, really, the paramedics of British Columbia are right now? This was a problem before we had even a pandemic, never mind now this heat emergency.
Yeah, our paramedics and dispatchers have been under incredible pressure, as you know. We've talked about this a few times. We leading into, we've always had, or not always, for a while we've had staffing and workload problems. We've been challenged with the opiate crisis that's not going away, getting better over 5 years. And then we threw on top of that this little thing called COVID that affected all of us in society. That's impacted the pressures. And then as COVID got more, we've seen incredible out-of-service levels with our ambulances not having staff to work and our recruitment and retention. And then leading into, we started sounding the alarm as the advocate for parish patients in the profession in BC, as well as the union last fall. And we know that we deal with adverse disasters or crises like this. We have fires, we have emergencies, we have riots, all those sorts of things that are the things that we have to prepare for and be ready for. Some things are unpredictable. We know every summer we see incredible outdoors activities and hot streak, not like what we're experiencing now. This is incredible. So in fairness, a lot of people don't have the capacity or they're vulnerable and don't have their own means to do this. And that's where we have to, as a society, help with looking after each other and that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make it any easier for those people affected. And that's where I guess that's what this is all about, is the patients and the public. And we're not able to provide the care that we really, that's what we all got into this profession for. And it's affecting our dispatchers and our paramedics' well-being. There's no question, not being able to provide the service that we really are meant to do.
And you know what? Therein lies the conversation that I'm looking to have here, because obviously the person dialing for emergency first responders needs it. But what of the person who takes that call and says, I have nobody for you, I can't get somebody to you, or then goes and puts the call out to the ambulance on the street, to the paramedic, and says, listen, as soon as you can move from where you are, I need to get you over to there, and then to there, and then to there, and then to there. I can't imagine the stress and responsibility that comes with that.
You just probably captured what every paramedic and dispatcher is experiencing right now. Last night, we have over 200 calls waiting to be dispatched with no ambulances for the last 24 hours. That's incredible numbers. We've never, ever seen that. Those dispatchers last night accessed our critical incident stress program more than I've ever heard of. They're all looking at their screens and knowing that they have no ambulances to send when people are calling in their time of emergency. And even for non-critical calls, when you're talking 8-10 hours waiting, that's not what we're about. That's not what the public expects from their ambulance service. But more importantly, for critical calls, we're looking at and emergency calls, we're up to 2-hour delays to get to them. And that's putting so much pressure on the responders, but that can't be lost. That's lives and people's well-being and their families, and the impacts are just too widespread. And that's where I focus on. Is my job is to advocate for the patients, the paramedics and dispatchers, and plead with the ambulance service to acknowledge this and let's do something immediately to fix this. We haven't heard from them at all.
Really?
No, they're not saying anything publicly. They're not doing anything. And we really need them to do that and to take ownership and accountability for their job they're required to do, is run the ambulance service.
Okay, so here we are in it. We're up to our necks in a 3, last I counted, between a COVID-19 pandemic, an opioid crisis, and a devastating heat wave, unlike anything we've ever seen before. Up to our necks in it right here, right now, with numbers off the charts in the calls that you're receiving for paramedics and emergency services. What can happen immediately? What action do you see that could be taken today, right now, to help your people as well as the people suffering in this emergency situation? Is there anything that can be done? And if so, at what level?
Absolutely. The ambulance service, and we reached out to them a number of times. We predicted that we were going to be in this staffing challenges. So, staff every ambulance at all costs. We need all hands on deck. Paramedics and dispatchers need to know that they're supported. And absolutely, we can do this. We need to do this not day-to-day scheduling. We need to get looking at the next week, because we're coming up to a long weekend, and this is not going to get better this week or as we approach the summer. We're going to see more and more increase. So let's plan for this. Let's actually fill those chairs, do it properly. Let's get creative, use some of the solutions we've been putting forward for the last 6 months to them, and let's get on with it. If we need to adjust rules and be creative, we're all in. Paramedics just want to be acknowledged and allowed the opportunity to solution-based. We're looking at any creative way to schedule and make sure we can fill these ambulances. We got people coming in on overtime when they probably shouldn't be, because they're trying to look after their colleagues, and do their part for our patients, because that's what we all got into this for. That's what we do. Everybody should be out for the for the same reasons. And I just when you look at an organization, we just need to hear from them and reassure the public and the paramedics that they have a plan. And utilize us. We're willing to step up and help as a union and profession.
Right. Do we have the staff to fill those empty ambulances right now? If they said, okay, here's the money, let's go, let's do this, would there be enough professional bodies to fill those ambulances that are sitting parked right now?
Yes, there would be. I believe there would be. Absolutely. We've got to address the long-term staffing and recruitment and retention, getting people into the profession. But we have suggested a number, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds with you, technical, complicated scheduling and that. Yeah. But there are solutions that could be meaningfully impact our ability to respond right now.
I was listening to the Mike Smith show earlier, where he had Health Minister Dix on the program and asked that question about getting these ambulances filled, and the answer was tantamount to, we are doing our best to hire and train the necessary people in order to staff those vehicles. And what you're saying, Troy Clifford, is that there is qualified staff available to fill the gap that is clearly putting us in crisis mode. I appreciate your time today. I want to follow up with you. We will stay in touch with you and stay on this topic, as it is incredibly important for the well-being of everybody in our province and for all of those who you represent. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Jody, and everybody be safe, and let's look after and check in on our friends and family and colleagues and the most vulnerable people.
Jody Vance with you. And if you've just tuned into the news, I want to take you back to the top of the show momentarily here, as we do have today's COVID-19 numbers. We had the big reopening BC briefing today, how things will change on Thursday, July the 1st, as was planned in stage 2. We've been sort of given these benchmarks of what to expect and what's changing. Let's start with the numbers from the last 24 hours. 29 new cases in total in British Columbia of COVID-19. Confirmed, just 7 of those in the Fraser Health region. That is a huge note, given the last year of this pandemic in British Columbia. 0 deaths reported in the last 24 hours. Excellent news. 110 in hospital across this province. That's actually up by 3 people, and 34 people remain in intensive care. That's down 3. 876 active cases across British Columbia, as Dr. Henry alluded to today, identified and contained are these active cases. And it is interesting to note that the reproductive number is so low. It is now likely only transmissible within a household, and we can thank vaccines for that. The 5 millionth COVID-19 vaccine will be administered tomorrow in British Columbia. I want you to hear Premier John Horgan making the announcement of the good news this afternoon.
I'm happy to announce that on July 1st, we will begin step 3 of our restart plan. After the longest public emergency in Canadian history, I believe it's safe to take the next step forward. That means we can go and cheer for our kids at the soccer game, in the arena, in the gymnasium. We can go to a friend's place for dinner. We can plan that wedding. We can go to the theater. We can go to a concert. We can engage again in what makes life so important. That's the interaction of people together to get a full flavor of the benefits and bounty of British Columbia, and to share with each other the blessings of being British Columbians. Let's take a moment today to reflect on where we've been and celebrate the opportunities that we have ahead of us as individuals, as families, and as communities, to put COVID-19 behind us, from a pandemic to a communicable disease.
All right, let's go now to another in attendance at today's press briefing. Alongside Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix was BC Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, Ravi Kahlon, who joins us on the line. Thank you for doing this.
Great, thanks for having me.
I want to start with sort of where you began at today's press briefing. With all of the good news, we have to be mindful that, green means go. Let's go stage 3 reopening plan in effect, how that might impact jobs and the people who are returning to jobs, or businesses looking for employees to return to jobs who may have found alternate employment. We've got some patience that needs to come with the excitement of this stage 3 reopening.
Yeah, no, right on. I think it's something that's going to be very important for both people and businesses. Not everyone is going to move through step 3 or stage 3 at the same pace, and we need to be able to respect people, give them the space. If a business, for example, would still like their patrons to wear a mask, we ask people to respect that. If you're going over to see a loved one and they ask you to wear a mask, please respect it, because everyone is at a different place in the pandemic and their comfort level. We need to be respectful to people as we move to this next stage.
So let's talk about this next stage, and in specific terms, for those who maybe missed the press briefing today or the top of the show with Keith Baldry sort of unpacking some of it, how different will stage 3 look as opposed to stage 2? Obviously, the masks are a big topic, but what is on that graph that Dr. Henry has pointed to in the last number of big press briefings to show how much our lives might change in this new adjustment?
Well, for example, if you want to go to a restaurant with more than 6 people, you can do that. Now they can move the tables in the restaurant to accommodate larger groups and the limit of 6, both indoor and outdoor, is no longer required. Larger venues that have large capacities. For example, some venues have capacity for 1,000 people. A banquet hall, now they can go up to 50% capacity, and so that's a significant change for maybe the Lions, for example, may want to have games at home, and so they'll be able to have 50% capacity. Theaters and outdoor events up to 5,000 minimum can operate without restrictions. People that want to travel here, we're still encouraging them to be vaccinated before they come, but people now can travel. So there's a whole host of changes that come with this. Another one is, for example, casinos will be opening up with their own safety plans. And so there's a whole host of changes that come with Step 3. And again, a lot of these things were signaled clearly when we launched the Restart Plan 7 weeks ago.
We're with Ravi Kahlon, who's the BC Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation. And certainly, Ravi, you have a heavy file, to be frank, when this is the chapter that we are headed into, the responsibility that you are carrying with being the Minister of Jobs. And wow, I mean, if an economic recovery position would ever be heady, here it is. What do you think your biggest challenges are moving forward here?
Well, we're already in a fairly good place here in British Columbia. We the last labor force survey that came out last month, which was taken in the middle of the third wave, showed that BC was at 99% pre-pandemic employment levels. And that's for two reasons. One is that people in BC have been doing the right thing. They've been following the rules. I know that we see coverage of some people breaking the rules, but overwhelmingly people have been following the rules to keep themselves and communities safe. So we've been able to, unlike other provinces, have manufacturing continue to operate, have construction to continue to operate through the entire pandemic, and seeing many businesses that have remained open. And secondly, the highest per capita supports for people and businesses in the country have put us in a place where we're actually well positioned for a very strong economic recovery.
It's interesting. You mentioned, the headline grabbers of people misbehaving or going against public health orders or being anti-vaxxers or anti-maskers. And the majority of British Columbians clearly pulling in the same direction to try and get through this, with 80% of those eligible getting at least their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. And certainly that was reiterated numerous times in today's press briefing, the importance of getting fully immunized and getting your first dose if you haven't already, and then obviously following up appropriately with your second dose and being fully immunized and getting back to work. If I may, hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot too much here, and certainly tell me if it's too much to ask, but we'd like to peek behind the curtain a bit as to what it has been like behind the scenes when people think that, we're seeing these press briefings, people are demanding more information, wanting to have an opinion on what decisions are made and how. Just how much intensity has there been for those of you at the BC legislature with, obviously with our provincial health officer leading the way and Dr. Bonnie Henry, unlike some provinces who have pushed politicians forefront, certainly science led here in BC. Can you give us sort of a personal experience of what these last few months have been like for you?
Well, I've aged a lot over the last 6 months. I'm not going to lie. I've got a lot more gray hairs coming through my goatee in my head. My partner said I looked old when I walked home the other day, and I can't even imagine the pressure that the Premier and Dr. Henry, Minister Dix, have been facing throughout this entire pandemic. Certainly, I think that everyone has tried to put away social media because we know it doesn't really represent where people really are, and so it's been quite intense. But at the same time, I've been so moved by the level of cooperation. We have an industry engagement table with 75 plus organizations, First Nations leaders, business leaders, labor leaders, not-for-profit leaders, all of them coming to the table and working out solutions for every stage that we've been in, and identifying challenges and also identifying solutions. So the amount of cooperation has been remarkable, and it's going to be critically important that we have that when we start looking at economic recovery as well.
Well, a very good news day for British Columbians, certainly here. And you may have put away social media, but I can say, Ravi Kailan, that your people put you forward to this media outlet so that we could speak with you on a very busy day. And we appreciate that very much. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And thank you for continuing to urge people to get vaccinated. And I hope people get a chance to hug their loved ones now that we're in the next step.
Looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to just having dinner with friends and not worrying about it. You know, that's where we're at here in our BC COVID-19 experience. And we have gratitude for all of our elected officials and all of our scientists here. Thank you so much for your time, Minister.
Yeah, thank you so much, and stay safe.
Jody Vance with you. Time to bring in Eric Chapman. Eric, we're melting, we're wilting in this heat. And there's a reason behind what's happening and why it hits us harder, you say.
Oh, yeah. I'm about to have your brain punched with knowledge here, Jody. Hit it, Tim.
Mark, I don't want to get too flippant about the weather because I know it is dangerous, but there is a place in Michigan called Hell. Hell's going to get 29 degrees over the weekend. British Columbia, I can now safely say, is going to be hotter than hell.
Was it Kiss album Hotter Than Hell? I think so.
I think you're right. I mean, not being too jokey about it, because it is going to be very dangerous. And you actually mentioned, in some places, with everything that's taking part, it may feel almost like 50 degrees.
Yes.
That's scary.
I'm not even going to say it. You know what I'm talking about. Your social media is probably stocked with images of thermometers and people cooking food on things they probably shouldn't be.
Delicious.
No, it's not. In fact, if you do that bit, you better eat the food you cooked, or don't bother. So we West Coasters are a little sensitive when it comes to the temperature, and not just because it's a wet heat, which is different from the dry heat of the prairies, but we're not built for it, physically or our homes. The reason some homes of a certain era can't take the heat is because of degree days, which is a building code. Here's my version of Schoolhouse Rocks to explain. They're called building codes. You use them to make your home. Standards to keep the building cool when it's warm. The measurements degree days, so the contractor, they have minimums to finish. And depending on the location, if there's AC in it. The country has 6 climate zones, and depending on the number of days that average a certain temperature, that is the determining factor for certain things, like air conditioning to be built or even thought of as an option. We are in Zone 4, and therefore no more than the minimums is what the contractor reaches for. Sorry, I went from Schoolhouse Rocks to Dr. Seuss there. Shake it off. So it's not a quality of work standard when it comes to minimums, but the minimum requirement for what contractors must do when building a home. Insulation R-type, windows, and air conditioning, air conditioning, air conditioning, air conditioning, air conditioning. Also, some condos don't allow AC because it just looks bad.
It's just ugly.
I know.
I like it.
So the homes in BC are not built for long days of intense heat that stretch on and on.
Are we there yet?
And neither are we physiologically. The Seattle Times reported in 2004, when the mercury climbs, a body that isn't used to high heat runs like a poorly tuned car. I'm like a Lada right now. Sweat glands and other systems are suddenly forced to work harder to accomplish the same tasks, and they don't like it. After a week or two of hot weather exposure, sweat glands become more efficient and effective, said Dr. John O'Kane, sports medicine professor and head physician for the UW Huskies team. Quote, you sweat more heavily and your sweat becomes more dilute, so you don't lose as much in terms of electrolytes, he said. Heart rate also drops. The body produces more plasma, effectively thinning the blood, O'Kane explained. Part of the acclimation may be in the mind as well. If you cool it, it will become cool? So our bodies are going through a lot. So drink lots of water and don't expect the usual when it comes to relief. And in the lower mainland, we usually expect this to hit, be hot, and then the rain come. I mean, We're in a rainforest. But this year's different under the heat dome. It's making things stretch out, so we might not get the rain. Hit me with some info, CNN.
When you have a trough or a dip in the jet stream, you have rising air. A lot of times that results in thunderstorms, rain. But when you have a ridge, quite the opposite happens. We have this dome of high pressure. You can see it here. When high pressure is there, we get sinking air. In fact, when that happens, the heat builds. It more or less becomes trapped inside this dome. Also, during a high pressure situation, you have a lot of sunshine and less cloud cover. Sometimes under these heat domes, we can get record-breaking temperatures. In fact, metropolitan areas can run much warmer than rural areas. These are called urban heat islands. In fact, during the day, they can run 2 to 5 degrees warmer than rural areas, but during the nighttime hours, they can run roughly 20 degrees warmer.
The current heat wave started with flooding rains across China on June 23rd. That fed energy into the jet stream across the North Pacific, making it stronger than usual and setting off a chain reaction of weather patterns that led to the high-pressure ridge building over in western North America and driving temperatures up in the U.S. and Canada. So there you go. Our homes aren't built for it, our bodies take time to adjust, and rains in China are to blame. Wow, what a trip. So if you feel like a wimp during all this, it's okay, you are, but we all are.
I loved how you went from Schoolhouse Rock into Dr. Seuss there. That was epic. That was some next level.
Thanks.
That was not confused. That was by design, Eric Chapman. Well done, my friend. And I feel less whiny. I like the UW coaches thing. Like, once we'll get used to this and we'll be hydrated. We won't feel as woozy as long as we continue to hydrate and take care of ourselves and one another. Jody Vance with you, and I want to share a little bit of insight into what we're doing here at CKNW right now with paramedics at their breaking point. We've been reporting it. You just heard Toby Kerr referencing it. Our chief coroner in BC saying 233 people have died between Friday and Monday due to extreme heat. This is a very unprecedented time. We walk out of stage 3 or into stage 3 of the global pandemic and are moving from the emergency phase there into another emergency here. Obviously, if you have an emergency, you want to call 911, but the delays and the wait times have been a headline over the past weeks and certainly over this past weekend. We want you to call our buzz line at 604-331-BUZZ to see if any help is available, because there's a full team effort behind the scenes. Gord McDonald, Gord McDonald, our senior news anchor here on the program. You hear him on Mornings with Simi. Gord is very involved with ensuring that all of us have insight and information. He forwarded along a screen cap from a mom group from the Tri-Cities. It's the Tri-Cities Mom Group, the hashtag TCMG. It's a Facebook post that caught his eye. And I'm going to read it to you here because it says, "Moms without AC. My house has central AC and my basement suite is not occupied. If someone needs a cool place to sleep tonight, PM me." It's a 2-bedroom suite. It got a pack and play if you need it. That's for the little kids. The kitchen has no supplies, but we can talk details. There are 2 queen beds. I'm in South Poco. I don't like thinking of babies out there in this heat with no relief. Someone is going to get sick. It's actually kind of cold down there because I keep my upstairs at 22. This is the type of thing that we need to be on the lookout for, and the thing that we need to become to help support our rescue services who, as mentioned, are threadbare right now to the breaking point. 3 converging crises in COVID-19, the opioid crisis, and now this heat dome. So again, if you have something to offer, if you have something that you desperately need, obviously if it's emergency, call 911. But you can also call our buzz line at 604-331-BUZZ. We are like social media, except for without the social. We're just media, and we're here to help you if we can. Eric Chapman is monitoring the buzz line there. So please do, and leave your name and your phone number when you're leaving a message. Want to get to our next guest here, someone who is in the thick of it. Captain Jonathan Gormick from Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services is on the line with us. Thank you for doing this, Captain.
Thanks for having us.
Let's talk about the release that was put out here that exemplifies just the level of stress being felt for Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services and for all paramedics, every first responder really in this heat and trying to manage these converging extreme strains on our system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note what you said, that it is every person in the emergency care system, all the way from the dispatchers at BCS and ECOM to the responders to even hospitals are under extreme strain right now with the influx of patients.
So how do we help? What can we do? Is there something to be done? We're at the peak of this right now, it seems.
Right. It's an incredibly difficult situation, but from the public's perspective, obviously we want people to call 911 if they're in any kind of health emergency. There have been stories reported about people self-transporting to hospital and things like that, and we certainly can't advise that, because if they were the driver, or even if they're the passenger in the car and their medical condition worsens, there's not much that can be done right there. And now they've made it harder for ambulance or fire to find them. Right. But with the heat emergency, a little bit of prevention goes a long, long way. So obviously the key ones are staying in the shade, staying hydrated, putting on sunscreen, and watching each other for signs of heat stress. If someone looks like they're sweating excessively, or that they've been out in the sun too long, particularly our vulnerable populations, people that might be a little bit older, children, people who might have other medical conditions or mobility issues. If we can intervene in those when they're just a little bit of heat stress and prevent them from becoming a heat emergency, that provides better outcomes for the patient, quicker recovery, and it doesn't strain the pre-hospital care system as much as if it progresses to the point where 911 is required.
Right. An ounce of prevention goes a long way here in this heat dome. So give us some advice now, if you will. If I want to go check on my neighbor, and I find that, they're stoic, they're saying, I'm fine. Clearly, it's way too hot in their home or apartment or suite. What kind of action should I be thinking to do to ensure they're okay? Are there some tips? Like what would I be looking for? What would I be testing for as a makeshift first responder before perhaps I call 911 on their behalf?
You know what? It's a lot of people's common sense goes a long way. If someone looks like they're in distress, if it's mild, if someone is coherent and able to answer questions properly, if they're making sense, they might be a little flushed and sweating. As long as someone's sweating, that's something that's reversible on scene with a little bit of water. Hydrate them, loosen any restrictive clothing. Again, if they're, it's really difficult to escape the heat period. But even in a house without air conditioning, if you can get a little bit of airflow, maybe offer to bring them over to your house or somewhere in the shade for a little bit, just to get them cooled down. And of course, monitor them to make sure it doesn't progress. The things that need a 911 call, or if someone is red but not sweating, it just means the body has exceeded its capacity to cool through sweating, especially if they have an altered level of consciousness as well. If they're not making sense, if they're slurring their words, that's a 911 call. And especially if someone has other medical conditions that might be made worse, such as a cardiac history or any kind of respiratory condition, that might be a 911 call as well, because the heat emergency would just make that worse. And, like he said earlier, we've seen numerous deaths lately because of the heat, and a lot of those that have driven cardiac emergencies.
We're with Captain Jonathan Gormick, who's Strategic Health Initiatives, Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services. Now, if I'm visiting my neighbor, trying to take care of the elders or the most vulnerable, after I call 911, should I be, taking a screen cap of their medicine cabinet? What if I don't know their medical history and I found them in some level of distress? We are hearing, reports of there being 130 and counting people who have passed away, sudden death in this heat wave confirmed. If you come upon somebody that you don't know, what steps might you take to sort of help when help arrives?
The better picture you can paint for dispatchers when you call them, the better job that they can triage and allocate resources, especially if it is really an emergency and we need to get someone there right away. If you can tell them, if you happen to know that your neighbor is in that vulnerable population, or that they have a heart condition or a mobility condition, with their consent, if you're in their home, sure, take a screenshot of their medicine cabinet, and then that might help even an ambulance dispatcher figure out if they do have cardiac or respiratory conditions
conditions or other things that might be made worse by the health emergency or by the heat emergency, of course, you can just ask them as well. Right. But the better picture you can paint for that BCAS dispatcher in terms of what you're seeing, how they're deteriorating, what they're normally like compared to what you see right now, the medical conditions, medications that they might be on, all those kind of things will help triage properly and get the right resources assigned at the right time.
And once again, if you have an emergency situation, you're calling 911. If you have a health question, you can call health services at 811, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's really difficult to describe in the general terms of when to call 811 versus 911. 911 is for emergencies, and we would never want someone downplaying their condition or someone else's condition when they need emergency help. But yeah, if it's just a question, 811 is the best source, your own physician, even a drop-in clinic.
That's a great idea. Okay, well, Captain, thank you. I know you're extremely busy today. We appreciate you taking some time to give us some guidance as we try and pull together as a community here and care for one another while our rescue services are so stressed. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Linda Steele Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe for free at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you get your on-demand audio. And join the conversation. You can reach me on Twitter at Steele Talk, on Facebook, and by email, linda@cknw.com. Talk to you next time.
For years, I've heard conspiracy theories about the Denver airport. Underground tunnels, secret societies, and even creatures hidden in plain sight. I never believed any of it till I started getting voice messages from strangers claiming to be entrapped in a labyrinth miles below the airport. I'm their only connection to the outside world, and what I've heard is terrifying. I'll share what I've pieced together, and maybe you can help me figure this out.
Listen to Escaping Denver, free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Something is out there.
Please, help me help them.